I'm tired.
The Late Morning Program with Nam Ras Podcast.
Hare Krishna, everyone. You're listening to the Late Morning Program with Nam Ras, the #1 Hare Krishna podcast in the world. I'm here with Devashis Prabhu. Devashis Prabhu, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure to be with you.
So, for those of you who don't know, Devashis Prabhu is a member of Sri Chaitanya Saraswati Mutt, which is a society that's basically a cousin society of what we know is ISKCON. It's the society of Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj, who Devashis Prabhu is a disciple of. And the way I met Devashis Prabhu first was in, I believe it was 2014, was the opening of their center near the Heathrow Airport. And so Devashis Prabhu kindly invited ISKCON devotees, which included my father-in-law, Kripamoya Prabhu. So I tagged along, and I was very much impressed by the devotees there, including Devashis Prabhu and also a few others there, and developed a relationship. And here we are, and I'm so glad that he was able to join today to tell us a little bit more about his background and also his relationship with Srila Sridhar Maharaj, because we don't know so much about him. We haven't heard so much in the sense of direct disciples and also direct experience of him. So maybe we can, unpack that today. But Devashis Prabhu, maybe we can start with your background of how you came in contact. Well, first of all, your upbringing, where you kind of grew up, and also how you came in contact with Krishna consciousness.
Sure. So I grew up in a little town called Hereford, which is on the border of Wales, and it's kind of, if people in cow farming circles, it's quite famous. The Hereford bull is quite famous, or perhaps in Vaishnav circles, infamous. But anyway, small town that produces cattle and produces cider, alcoholic apple cider. That's famous for that also. It's a kind of rural town, farming town, and I grew up there. And when I was about 14 years old, my friend, very close friend, his mother died suddenly of cancer, and the doctors had misdiagnosed everything. They weren't able to understand, what was happening till the last moment. She died. Long story short, anyway, he was inconsolable. We had a friend who was a kind of a hippie guru type friend who lived in the vicinity, that we used to buy things from him sometimes. But we kind of considered him like a guru, and his name was Bamboo because he played a bamboo flute. And we, as we thought of him like a kind of guru figure, we went to see him. We all thought, like, how can we help our friend whose mother just died? Let's take him to see Bamboo, and he'll be able to like give him some words of wisdom, some comfort like this. So we went. He lived down on this like a caravan site near the river, in this caravan with his wife and his 2 kids, and we went in and we saw him, and we smoked some pot, and we talked, and then he said, "Okay, I have something for you," to my friend Ian. And he went to this cupboard, and he opened the cupboard, and he brought out this big like tome in a silk cloth, and he unwrapped it, and he opened it up, and he started reading. "For the soul there's never birth nor death, nor having once been does he ever cease to be. He's unborn, he's eternal, he's not slain when the body's slain." And we were all like, wow. And of course it was Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, as it is, which he held in great reverence despite who else he may have been. And he wrapped it back in the cloth, and he gave it to this is for you. He gave it to my friend. So that my friend, he kind of like got into the whole Hare Krishna thing for a while, and he was visiting Bhaktivedanta Manor, and and I was kind of not so much into it at that time. But then I got I got a project I had to do at school for sociology. We had to do a project on some kind of social phenomenon, and so I thought, hey, let me do a project on the Hare Krishna movement. And so I, bought lots of books on Hinduism and like this, and my friend Ian, who'd been to the manor, he had a few books from the temple there, so he gave those to me, and I made this project. And by the way, I got like 100% credit for it because no one had ever covered it before. They used to it was the Communist Party or this thing, like some other thing, but
Right.
so I covered that, and as part of that, I went to the manor for the weekend to, just like see what it was all about firsthand. So this was, I don't know, maybe 1976 or something like this. I went there, and yeah, as I say, just a school kid in my school holiday with my friend. And when I got there, I thought I liked it, but I thought these people are crazy. you know, like they gave us some beads to chant on, and they gave us, and we just slept outside what were Srila Prabhupada's rooms in the corridor there in our sleeping bag. And I remember waking up in the morning and thinking I'd woken up in a beehive because all you could hear was this kind of buzzing noise, and which I then realized were devotees chanting and walking up and down, and okay. So anyway, we stayed there a few days, got lots of books, met lots of devotees. But some of the things that they told me, like one of the devotees was telling me about Sanatan Goswami and his touchstone. And I'm thinking, these guys, they believe in touchstones. They're like really crazy. That was my takeaway from that. Not the story that went along with that. And then another devotee said to me, "Hey, like, why didn't you just stay here?" And I said, "Well, we're going back to school next week." He said, "No, don't go back to school. It's just like a slaughterhouse. The school is a slaughterhouse." Okay. And he
Popular
said,
line.
yeah, he said, uh, and your friends and your family, they're just demons.
Oh my gosh.
And I thought, he's never met my friends or my family. How would he know that? And coming from no kind of background in devotion or anything like that, my idea of demons are people with horns and pitchforks and tails, and like from Buffy the Vampire Slayer or something. Then so then I left there with a whole bundle of stuff, but thinking, wow, that I'm never going there again. Like that's the end of that. Like what a bunch of crazies they are. So anyway, I returned home, and at that then I'm like I'm just reading books all the time, anything I can get my hands on, and I was really interested in spirituality. Like I was raised as a Christian, but like rejected that as more or less nonsense. And then I started looking into Zen and Buddhism and all kinds of different things. And my English teacher, actually, she gave me a book of Srila Prabhupada, Sri Ishopanishad. So that was in my bookshelf. And just like I ran out of things to read. So then I started reading that. And when I started reading that, I was like, wow. Like every page was like, wow. Yeah, that's true. That's right. Like everything was like kind of resonating with me. And I was thinking, is this the same that I went to? Is this the same thing? Like, that anyway, then I had those beads. I started chanting on those beads, and then I remember, and my friend Ian, who was, originally he kind of like drifted from, he wasn't interested so much in that anymore. But we used to go, because we used to go out on a Friday and Saturday night, and to go to the town from where we were, there was like a disused railway line, and we used to cycle down there on our bicycles. And I just get everybody chanting, and we'd all be chanting Hare Krishna as we're going down on our bicycles into town. And I'm just chanting on these beads, like. And then one of my friends said to me one night, he said, "Hey, isn't it right that if you're chanting Hare, you shouldn't be drinking and you shouldn't be smoking pot and you shouldn't be doing these things?" And I said, "Yeah, it's right. It's true." But I was kind of attached to all of that, and of course it was the social circle that I moved in also. That's what they were into. So then I was praying to Lord Krishna. "Oh, Krishna, please, I know it's wrong to do these things and offensive, but just, like, if you need to punish me for that, okay, punish me, but don't let me stop chanting Hare Krishna. I just have to keep on chanting," and then I'm just chanting, 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 and reading books, and like sometimes meeting devotees in the town, and getting another book, and then I started corresponding with one of the devotees at the manor, and then when I finished school, I went to I was visiting the temple regularly by then, and then I was studying for a degree in fine art, and like halfway through, I just decided I'm going to go and join the temple, much to the dismay of my mother and father.
Wow.
So I was like 17 then, and I just decided I'm going to join, and I joined. Actually, I joined in 1977, just after Srila Prabhupada's disappearance at
Wow.
Bhaktivedanta Manor, and I'm kind of coming and going, and like joining and then running away and then coming back, and actually when I first joined, I didn't know, because nobody. I guess it was so raw. Nobody spoke about Srila Prabhupada's disappearance, so I just thought like he's still there, and then I remember asking one of the devotees, like, "So when's Prabhupada coming?" And they said, "Oh, no, he passed away earlier this year." And I was like, I kind of like fell out of a tree or something, Then, it was like a shock to me, but I had to deal with that,
Right.
and so anyway, I was initiated by one of the new gurus, one of the 11,
Mhm.
and I served at first at the manor, and then later at Chaitanya College, which was a big stately home that they bought, excuse me, in the early 80s, but were unable to maintain that eventually. But anyway, and I lived there, and the guru that I was initiated by, when he would come, he would ask me to help him with his puja in the morning. So I would help him with his puja, and while he's doing his puja, he was playing these tapes of this some Vaishnava, and I was hearing all these things, and I'm thinking, "Who's that?" And I asked him, "Who's that? Who's that on that tape?" And he said, "Oh, that's Srila Sridhar Maharaj, Prabhupada's godbrother." And I said, "Oh, okay." Never really thought much about that. But anyway, there was he was visiting Srila Sridhar Maharaj, and, like, um, taking shiksha from him. And so, there were some political or, upheaval events around 1982, as you may know the history, but there was like a kind of an exodus of devotees who went to India with
Right.
him, that guru, and ended up at the ashram of Srila Sridhar Maharaj. So by circumstance, I didn't go with that main, like, throng of devotees. So and I had some, let's say, a disagreement with one of the leaders there at that time, and they said, "No, you can't come. You have to go home to your parents." So, which I did, and my mother thought I'd gone crazy because I just was sitting in my room, like, crying all day, and thinking, "Oh, I can't go back to ISKCON. I can't go with my guru to India. Then, like, my spiritual life's over for this life."
They said you couldn't come because you had some disagreement with them.
Yeah, basically, yeah, with
Mm.
one of the leaders there.
Mhm.
I won't go into that. That's a whole other thing.
Sure,
But
sure. No, you don't need to.
but I thought that some of their philosophy was not correct. I've been reading Srila Prabhupada's books since I was 14, and by
Right.
this time I'd like read all of them, and they were saying some like actually offensive things, and I objected to that.
Mm,
I don't know why. I was just a kid and I wasn't really particularly brave, but it just raised something in me that I couldn't agree with, and I
right.
just said, okay, where do you find this in Prabhupada's books? These things that you're saying, where do you find them? And
Mm,
that fellow said, okay, we'll talk about this later, and he carried on with his little diatribe at that time. And then afterwards, he called me to like what he'd made his office at this place we were staying, and he said, I'm not going to send you to India with the other devotees. Here's your train fare, like get out, basically.
oh my gosh.
So which is what I did. But one of the devotees, who I didn't even really know at that time, he sent me a telegram. There's no internet. There's like we didn't have a telephone in my mother's house. There was like so if you wanted to contact someone quickly, it was a telegram. So he sent me. I got this telegram. My mother said, "Oh, this telegram's come for you." So I open it up and it says, "Come to London. I've got you a ticket for India." And
Wow.
and ring this number. So so he'd witnessed that kind of altercation I'd had with that devotee, and and he went out and just on the street and collected money and bought me a ticket to India. Like I don't know, like how or why or even anything, but so I went to London, got the ticket, and I came to India, and came to the mott. And at that time, all the other devotees they were kind of already wherever they were in the mott. In fact, Srila Sridhar Maharaj had told them, "You can't stay here," basically, because like over 100 devotees there. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj said, "When there's so many people, I gets besides myself." That was his actual. I can't deal with so many people. So
Right.
he said, "You may say Sridhar Maharaj is very cruel, but you're going to have to live somewhere else." So,
Wow.
uh, one devotee had donated some land to Sridhar Maharaj about 3 miles from the temple, the mott in Navadvip. And so all the men were staying in there. They'd made this big kind of makeshift pandal, and all the men were staying there. And I came, as I say, like some days later, and I was given a room in the mott. And so then after a few days, some of the people who were in charge from our side, they were saying, "Well, you got to move down with the other devotees down on the land there. You can't stay here." So, and I should say just before that when I arrived there, one of Srila Sridhar Maharaj's senior brahmacharis, he took me to meet Srila Sridhar Maharaj. So, like my first meeting, and I was kind of almost shaking. I was so much in awe of this
Yeah.
person. Then when I went up there, he was just sitting there, and they introduced me to him. And my first impression was like just how human he was.
Mm,
Like, have you got a mosquito net? Have you got a mattress? Have you taken prasadam? They're giving you, like just, and no airs and graces, no kind of holier than thou, sitting on a pedestal or anything. Just very human, and his dealings were just very normal, which was kind of a little bit of a shock to me.
yeah.
Wasn't my experience with other gurus at that time.
I have a
So
question. I have a question. So,
yeah,
your first experience was hearing that tape while you were,
yeah.
doing that seva. But then how did you know more about him, or you didn't know more about him before you met him?
I didn't know anything about him actually.
Wow.
I was just going to be with my guru. That
Right.
was my thought. So
Right.
I went there, but after arriving there, I'm thinking, wow, like after a few days, I'm thinking, wow, all those things that I read in Srila Prabhupada's books, they're not just things that happen in the distant past. They're like, it's happening now and it's happening here. That was
Mm,
my feeling, like, and okay, I didn't know who Srila Sridhar Maharaj was, and I couldn't really understand much, like what he was saying or anything, you know. Then, as I say, one these devotees, they were saying, "You got to go and stay down on the land with the other devotees." So I went down to check it out in this pandal, and it was like a vision of hell, you know. It was horrible. They were all the devotees there. They were all fighting with each other, you know, and oh, it was awful, and it was so hot. It was like going into an oven when you went inside there, 'cause it was all like cloth sack and corrugated iron, and you know, like a makeshift kind of place. And one of my godbrothers, I found him like lying in a pool of mud outside, just like to get some kind of cool
Oh my
on like lying in a gumsha in mud, and he said to me, he looked up and he said, "Just want to go home. I just want to go." And I thought, "There's no way I'm staying here. Like, I don't know. I haven't got any money. I haven't got any, but I'm not staying here." And so I went back up to the mott, and I just like I don't know why, but I just walked up to Srila Sridhar Maharaj's room, and he was there talking with a few devotees, and I asked him, "Maharaj, would it be okay if I stay here?"
That's awesome.
And he said, "Yes, you can stay here. Yes, if you want to, you can stay here." Okay, so that was it, and there was a guest house being built at that time, but it was completely unfinished. So I found a room. It had no floor. It was just bare brick. It hadn't been finished or anything, and I put a mattress down. I got a mosquito net. I strung that up. The mosquito net was more holes than net. And but somehow man, there's no electricity, there's no running water in that room. There's like nothing at all, but I just thought this is better than staying down there. So, and every day they would come up from the land and meet all the devotees, because the householder devotees, they were staying in what we used to call the blue house, which was the house where Srila Prabhupada stayed when he came to visit Guru Maharaj. Most of the householders were staying there with their children and so on, so they'd all meet up at the mott, and they'd all go on Sankirtan, Nagar Sankirtan, down into Navadvip. And that was kind of bizarre. It was a really bizarre kind of Sankirtan, and I used to think, what do the people of Navadvip think of that? I can't imagine. But anyway, so after the first one, when they would come up, I'd hide until they were gone, so I didn't have to go with them. Kind of feeling really guilty about it. But once they were gone, I'd go upstairs and sit with Srila Sridhar Maharaj, and there would be some like sannyasis would be there discussing things with him, and some ISKCON sannyasis, some Gaudiya Mott sannyasis, and different people would come, and Guru Maharaj would be speaking, and I would just like sit in the background and listen to him. And then when the Sankirtan party came back, one day when the Sankirtan party came back, as was Guru Maharaj's habit, that if any Sankirtan party would come towards the mott, whatever he was doing, he would stop and he would go to his balcony at the front, and he would make his pranam and say some prayers to the Sankirtan party. So they came up, and so Maharaj was speaking, and he stopped, and he came, and he's making his pranam, and he's listening to their chanting. And then he sat down and he said, if the leader of the Sankirtan party is not a Shuddha Bhakta, it may just be Namaparad.
Wow.
And then he carried on with his talk, and after hearing that, I thought, okay, now I don't feel bad about not going with them on their Sankirtan party.
Wow.
But anyway, they were trying to do something. But anyway,
Right.
so every day I would sit there with him. But then my guru at that time, he wants to make some like preaching pamphlets, and he knew that I had some background in graphic design and art and all these things. So he asked me if I would design it and go to Calcutta for composing it. So okay, I went to Calcutta. There was no branch of Chaitanya Saraswati Math in Calcutta at that time. So I stayed in a hotel, and myself and 2 other devotees, we like put this with the printer. We put these 2 pamphlets together, and literally then it was, like typesetting letter by letter in a block, and like it was before any kind of computerized digital printing or anything like that. So it took a little while to put everything together, but then the first things came off the first proofs came up from the press, and I was really excited about them, and so I rushed back to Navadvip. I got the last train back to Navadvip, and I arrived at the Mott probably about 11 or 11:30 at night. And I came in, and that my guru then, at Maharaj, he was still up, staying in his room with some of his associates, and I went in and I told him I had the proofs. So we started looking over the proofs. Gradually, everyone else, they all disappeared, and it was just he and I. And then he's making some alterations, like corrections, adding this, taking this away, and like this. And then, just like, he turned to me and he took my hands and he said to me, "Prabhu, I want you to know something about me." And I'm like, "Yes, Gurudev." And he said, "I want you to understand that I'm a crazy man, and that tomorrow I could run off with some woman." And I'm just thinking, oh, he's so humble. And he was a humble Vaishnava, there's no question about that. But he said, "But now you've come to the lotus feet of Srila Sridhar Maharaj. He's the real thing. He's like a real Vaishnava. So I want you to make a promise to me now that whatever happens, that you'll stay with Srila Sridhar Maharaj."
Wow.
And I'm like, "Yes, Gurudev, of course." And he said, "No, promise me." And I said, "Okay, Maharaj, I promise you." And I really didn't think any more about that at all. But then a little while later, that guru, that Maharaj, he fell down and left devotional service. And of course, as soon as that happened, that just came ringing in my head. You promise me that you'll stay with Srila Sridhar Maharaj. He's the real thing. Then that's exactly what I did. So then I wrote to Srila Sridhar Maharaj, not just me, but a few of us previous disciples who also were of the same mind. We wrote to him and asked him, "Will you accept us as your disciples?" And he wrote back, actually, and I still have that letter here somewhere that says that you should think. He said, first of all, you should not think in any disparaging way towards your guru, but rather you should think, if he's having some difficulty and leaving the line, that is due to taking sinful disciples like you. And you should think in this way. And if anyone makes any like disparaging remarks, or thinks that it's funny or any of these things, he said, then we cannot guarantee that the same fate will not happen to them. Then he said, Brahmananda Bharati, Mahaprabhu would not recognize him when he was wearing the deer skin, but as soon as he removed the deer skin and wore the dress of a Vaishnava, then Mahaprabhu accepted him as his guru. Then in the same way, this devotee, now he's wearing the deer skin of intoxication. We don't recognize him. But if again he'll leave that and take up the practices of pure devotion, we must accept him. So then, and some other things, he said, then if you cannot offer your food to him like this, you can offer to Nityananda Prabhu. He's the general representation of Gurudev, and like this, and gave some mantra for worshipping Nityananda Prabhu, offering food to Nityananda Prabhu. And then he told, then now wait and see. You wait and see. And we had to wait for 1 year. And after 1 year, when it was clear that he would not return, then Srila Sridhar Maharaj accepted us as his disciples, those of us that wanted that. So,
And were you in India throughout this time, or did you come
No,
back?
at that time I'd come back to London,
Okay.
and I was in London, and there was once all of the um, the controversy had come to light, and we found out that he'd fallen, and so there were like maybe four kind of groups sprang up at that time. There were those who said like, well, whatever he does is Leela. We're just going to follow him, no matter what. And
Right.
they did that. Then there were those who said, okay, we're going back to ISKCON, and they went back to ISKCON. And then there was a third party that said, forget it. Don't want anything to do with this Hare Krishna business anymore. And they just left altogether. And then there were a few of us who had decided we would want to hear from Srila Sridhar Maharaj and try and take shelter of him. So that's what we did. And then, in 1983, we were initiated by him, and we opened our first center in London. We asked Srila Sridhar Maharaj, can we open a center in your name in London? And his reply was, my Guru Maharaj wanted me to preach in London, but I was not able to go. But still, I consider London my place of service. So if you can make some center in London in the name of Sri Chaitanya Saraswati Maharaj, I will consider this a great service to my Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur.
Wow.
So we tried to do that, and we've had a center in London since that time, 1983, at different locations, and I was involved with that right from the beginning.
Approximately how many people were in that group of devotees who, that you said the four groups? There was one group that went to Sridhar Maharaj.
Maybe 10 or 20
Okay.
in London. Others around the world, but in London, or
Right.
maybe 10 or 20 devotees,
Right.
maybe more. But and a hardcore, you can say maybe 6 to 10 that were staying in this building that we had, this house, that wanted to make a center in the name of Guru Maharaj. A lot of the devotees were married and had families, and had to do their own thing. But I was not married at that time, so I didn't have any other anything else to do in my life, or any other obligations in my life. So I tried to be part of that, and yes, and every year I would go and stay with Srila Sridhar Maharaj after that. And sometimes it was just a few weeks, and sometimes it might have been some months. Like maybe the longest time I stayed in one go was like 6 months. So from 1982 until his passing in 1988, I would spend sometime every year there with him.
Wow. What was the I know there was an unfortunate time in ISKCON when the leaders of ISKCON felt that Srila Sridhar Maharaj was a threat to them, and so there was a kind of like a widespread kind of like villainization of of him and his character and everything like that. When was that, and what were you doing during that time, or had you already completely left by that time?
Yeah, I mean, it was around beginning about that time, 1982 onwards, and
Okay.
Initially, the leaders of ISKCON came to Srila Sridhar Maharaj for advice, as Srila Prabhupada had advised them, and it's on record that Srila Prabhupada told his leading disciples, if you need to consult with anyone on philosophy and so on, you can go to my god brother Sridhar Maharaj. And of course, and Srila Guru Maharaj was very much wanted to help the devotees there, and wanted to help ISKCON, because he had so much admiration and regard for Srila Prabhupada's preaching, and their relationship was very close. I mean, if you read Satsvarup Maharaj's Prabhupada Lilamrita in the first volume, Lifetime in Preparation, there, Srila Prabhupada says very clearly, from our very first meeting, I knew Sridhar Maharaj is a pure devotee of Krishna. and Guru Maharaj, meaning Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he wanted, and Krishna, he and Krishna wanted that Sridhar Maharaj would prepare me. Something like that. I mean, I can't remember the exact quote, but something to that effect. And then their relationship was very close. You may or may not know, but the very first branch of Chaitanya Saraswati Math in Calcutta was in the house of Srila Prabhupada at Sitakanta Banerjee Lane. So at that time, Prabhupada was, working as a chemist, and he had a three-story building, and on the ground floor was his living quarters, and on the first floor, which we say the first floor, I think you say the second floor, but was vacant, and then there was his laboratory. So the vacant part, he offered that to Srila Sridhar Maharaj to be a branch of Chaitanya Saraswati Math in Calcutta, which Srila Sridhar Maharaj accepted, and he had 2 or 3 brahmacharis would stay there all the time, and he also would come and stay there sometimes. But he sent Govinda Maharaj, Srila Govinda Maharaj, who is his successor, and Srila Govinda Maharaj was Gorendu Brahmachari at that time. And he came to Srila Sridhar Maharaj in 1947, and more or less within a week of Srila Sridhar Maharaj meeting with him, he considered, this boy will be my successor in the future. So anyway, he sent him to Calcutta to learn Sanskrit. There was one of his disciples was a Sanskrit teacher in Calcutta. So he sent Gorendu Brahmachari to Calcutta, and he stayed in Srila Prabhupada's house. And he said, he's Abai Babu, as they called him in those days. Abai Babu, he's making a commentary on Bhagavad Gita. You can learn Gita from him. So every day, he would meet with Srila Prabhupada, and they would discuss Bhagavad Gita, and then he would go, for his studies, and Srila Prabhupada would make him take breakfast. They would take breakfast together, and Srila Govinda Maharaj said, "I'm just like a village boy, and my breakfast is muri, like puffed rice. I like muri, and with a little sugar and maybe one rasagula, and they kind of mix it all together." But Prabhupada used to laugh at him and say, that is nothing there. It's just cheating the stomach. It's just air, like puffed rice. There's nothing there. Then he'd say, he would tell his wife, like, give him kachori, give him luchi, give him, like aloo dum. These are the things that Srila Prabhupada used to have for breakfast. So,
Right.
like this. Anyway, he would go for his studies during the day and come back in the evening. And at that time, there were a few publications of Chaitanya Saraswati Math, and so Govinda Maharaj would go out for preaching, like for distributing these literatures. And then when they were run out, Srila Prabhupada would tell him, I have this Back to Godhead magazine that I print. You can distribute that. So actually, Srila Govinda Maharaj, he was the first distributor of Back to Godhead magazine, other than Srila Prabhupada. And he would go and distribute that. And he told us, Prabhupada, he's like, his living style, he said, was like a prince. Everything was always like first class or standard class, never below that. He would never accept anything below that. And he said, and his fervor for preaching, he said, I never met anyone in my life with so much like fervor to preach about Krishna consciousness. And he said, and he had, through his business contacts, he said he had very high class friends, who moved in a very kind of high class society. And he said he would arrange like programs at their homes. And he said, and he would take me because he was Govinda Maharaj as a brahmachari, he was wearing saffron, and he would say he would make me give the talk, the Bhagavatam, read the Bhagavatam. Said, but he would give me the seat and make me read the Bhagavatam because of the red cloth. They, in India they respect that. He said, but he would explain everything. I would read, and then he would explain everything. And so this way, then many stories I could tell you about that, but perhaps we don't have time for that right now. But there's and Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he would come and stay with Prabhupada. So they had this very close association for more than 10 years, and actually Srila Prabhupada paid for the first publication in Bengali of Prapanajivanamritam, which you may know is the book which Srila Sridhar Maharaj wrote about Sharanagati, and Srila Prabhupada got his sister, or Pishima Bhavantari Devi, to fund that, to pay for that book to be published. The first publication was funded by her, and she's a disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, but she hadn't taken second initiation, so she asked Srila Sridhar Maharaj for second initiation. But at that time, Srila Sridhar Maharaj wasn't taking any disciples. He wouldn't take any disciples. So then he told her, "You can go to Madhav Maharaj, and he can give you." So, and then later, of course, Srila Prabhupada, when he decided he wanted to leave family life and take sannyas, he came to Srila Sridhar Maharaj to ask for sannyas, and Srila Sridhar Maharaj said, "If I give you that, then your family will be very angry with me," because he knew them all very intimately, of course.
Right.
So I don't feel that it would be appropriate for me to give you sannyas. But I already gave sannyas to Keshav Maharaj, so the mantra is with him. So if you take sannyas from him, it'll be the same as taking the mantra from me. And that's, of course, what Srila Prabhupada did. He took sannyas from Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj, who already was a sannyasi from Srila Sridhar Maharaj, although he was senior to Srila Sridhar Maharaj in the mission.
Right.
In fact, most of the senior disciples of Saraswati Thakur, after Saraswati Thakur's disappearance, they all more or less accepted Srila Sridhar Maharaj as the head of the Gaudiya mission after Prabhupada, Saraswati Thakur.
Could you tell us some stories that from 82 or 83 to 88 that stand out to you from visiting Srila Sridhar Maharaj?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm sure there's so much. I'm sure there's so much to unpack there, but
I mean, at that time, Srila Sridhar Maharaj more or less never left the temple. He never went out. He never accepted invitations to go anywhere. He never went for preaching. He just stayed there, and was very much absorbed in his own bhajan and discussing the scripture with the devotees and so on. But there's some standout things I can remember. One was when he did leave the temple one time, and that was to see that land, that I told you about before, where the devotees were staying.
Yeah.
So after that was all gone, then that land was used for cultivation for the temple there. So they used to grow vegetables and fruits and so many things there. Then and Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he used to call it the Land of Nectar. That was his name for it. It was actually number 2 Gauranga Colony was the actual address, but so one day he wants to go to see that place. So there were just a few of us there at that time, and so Guru Maharaj called myself and my godbrother Gauracharan Prabhu, who's also from England, and he asked, "Do either of you drive?" And I didn't drive. And Gauracharan Prabhu, he also didn't have a driving license, but he said, "I've driven tractors, on the farm." And so Guru Maharaj said, "Okay, that'll do." So they bought the car round. The temple had a little white ambassador car. They brought that round, and Guru Maharaj went into the car, and Gauracharan Prabhu drove him down to the Land of Nectar. I guess it's about 3 miles drive or something like that. So we went there. I tagged along as well, and when we got there, they opened the gates and came in. There were a couple of brahmacharis staying there, and some of the laborers who were doing the cultivation. And Guru Maharaj he didn't get out of the car. He just wound the window down, and he asked one of the devotees there, bring some earth, and they went and brought some earth. He put that on his head, and then he made some prayers, and then we went back back to the temple. That was like the only time I'd ever saw him like physically go outside of the temple, and really he didn't even come down from his room very much. Only on a few festival days, almost always on Gora Purnima, and not always on Janmashtami, but always on Radhastami. And
Was it due to his health, or just it was his personality to be more
I
introverted?
think a bit of both, really. It's a bit
Yeah.
of both. So, at that time, I mean, his health was poor. He was more or less blind. He couldn't see anything. And he could, if he wanted to see something, but he'd have to put it like this close to his face to see it.
Yeah.
And, his health wasn't good, but more or less he was just kind of absorbed in his own bhajan, really, up in his rooms. And if you wanted to see him, you'd go there and see him. And even then, it was like in the morning time. We would go for Mongol Aarti, and after the morning program and everything, then we would see he's going to speak today or not. Maybe like at 8 o'clock in the morning, something like that. And a lot of the times he didn't want to speak with us, but Srila Govinda Maharaj, who was always there in the background, he wanted to bring the devotees to Guru Maharaj. Like that was his thing, was like bring all the devotees to Guru Maharaj. So then he would persuade Guru Maharaj. He would say, Maharaj, oh, they've all come from so far just to hear from you. Just sit 5 minutes with them, and you don't even have to say anything. If you just sit with them for 5 minutes, they'll be happy. And Guru Maharaj would say, okay. And he would come and sit, and then we would sit with him, and inevitably he would say, any questions? And everyone had so many questions, and then Guru Maharaj would start speaking, and that 5 minutes would sometimes become like 2 hours, and he would be speaking, and like it would be flowing, and sometimes he would say, speaking like this with an intimate group of devotees, he said, this is like massage to me. So like therapy, like therapeutic. So,
and what was?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No.
What was the like? Did he ever mention what his feelings were of the way he was treated? And I think he understood that he had become villainized by the leaders of ISKCON at that time. And did he mention to you or to the devotees of his feelings about that?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, generally, he would take it in a very humble and light-hearted way. He would say, someone would say, "Oh, they're saying this about you, Marge, or they're saying that about you," and he'd say, "Only that? They really don't know how bad I actually am.
Wow.
What kind of character I have. If they knew that, they could say something." But then, there were some very unfortunate events. Like one of the leaders at that time over in Mayapur. Maybe I shouldn't even say this. It's too much. But there in Navadvip there was a gunda, like a gangster, who owned the ice cream factory in Navadvip, and it was well known that if you wanted somebody taken out, killed, you could pay him and he would do the job for you.
Wow.
And not for very much either. A very reasonable cost. So anyway, one of the leaders from Mayapur, they went and approached him and asked, "We want you to take out Srila Sridhar Maharaj."
Oh my gosh.
They felt so threatened by it. And this is actually true. And that Gunda, he knew who Srila Sridhar Maharaj is. So first thing was he refused to take the contract, if you like. And the second thing was he came and told Srila Sridhar Maharaj, this person has asked me, to like have you killed. And he said, but you're a great sadhu. I could never agree to such a thing as that. He said, but if you want, I can have him taken out, no charge at all to you.
Gosh.
Srila Sridhar Maharaj said, no, it's not necessary.
How did devotees, you and your peers, like, how did you deal with, a society that you basically, joined, but then it became so ugly at some point to where your faith was flowing very naturally. It was such a like a it was so against that in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, there was some anger and some, but more or less, at least I can say in my own case, I just closed it. It was a chapter in my life that was now closed.
Yeah.
And sad though it was, because I had many friends in ISKCON at that time, I closed the door on that, and I kind of just thought, okay, we're just going forward now. We
Right.
wish them well, but we can't be involved with that any longer.
Right.
And that lasted for quite a while. But now things are very much different,
Mm.
and I see that many of the the senior devotees in ISKCON who are still around. I mean, let's face it, many senior disciples of Srila Prabhupada aren't around any longer, but those that are and that kind of stayed there through thick and thin, most of them have very good regard for Srila Sridhar Maharaj and for our mission, Srila Sridhar Maharaj's mission, Chaitanya Saraswati Maharaj. And again, I have many friends in ISKCON, and many of the gurus in ISKCON also, that at the moment, who are not just favorable to our mission, but, like you can say, really friends of our mission. So
Mm.
we don't make any pretense of being in competition with ISKCON or anything like that. We're not. We don't think of that. ISKCON is huge, and it's by the will of Lord Krishna. Krishna consciousness is spreading all over the world through ISKCON, and so we don't have any feeling of rivalry. In
Right.
fact, we're thinking of ourselves, as you said, like a cousin organization, perhaps poor cousin, but no, we hope that everything will go wonderfully. And how can we not have appreciation for Srila Prabhupada's preaching, because we don't know anything about Krishna consciousness or Sridhar Maharaj or Govinda Maharaj or Chaitanya Saraswati Maharaj or anything, if not for Srila Prabhupada. So then we're always wanting the very best for ISKCON and all the devotees there, and I'm happy to say that in large, generally, that difficult time, and when there was many offenses made to Srila Sridhar Maharaj, that's gone, that's over. I think there may be a few who have some bad feeling towards Guru Maharaj, and but that Srila Sridhar Maharaj had nothing but good intention with them. He never want. I think they felt that, let's be clear. I think that the leaders at that time, they felt like, Srila Sridhar Maharaj is so far and away more knowledgeable than we are. And let's face it, the leaders were like in their 30s. They'd only been around for a few years, didn't know anything. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj was, like, even then, a veteran sannyasi of Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur. Then they felt threatened by that. They thought, oh, if people start hearing from him, they'll all go to him,
Mm.
and leave ISKCON. But Guru Maharaj never wanted anything like that. And in fact, that he would have hated that. He didn't want big societies, big position, or anything. He wanted to, a small group, and he would say, I can help you as much as I can help you. And not more than that. And he had no ambition to be a big person in anybody's estimation. But so, then I think now people have understood that. And I think it was more a knee-jerk reaction out of fear for losing their own position, or for, for uh, diminishing the International Society for Krishna Consciousness standing, whereas actually if they'd have continued to hear from Guru Maharaj there, that maybe it would have become greater, I think.
Mm.
But anyhow, yeah, it was a difficult time. But like I say, I'm happy to say that it's over, by and large, and so many. Again, we have so many friends in the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, and we're really happy about that.
Yeah. I remember at the opening of the Mutt in near Heathrow,
Yeah,
Tyagi Maharaj said, he was speaking and he said, I think it was Govinda Maharaj or Srila Sridhar Maharaj had said, the only difference between ISKCON and us is that ISKCON dresses better. ISKCON dress better than we do.
yeah, that was Srila Govinda Maharaj's.
Right.
He actually, when somebody asked him that, like, what's the difference between you and ISKCON? That was his reply. They dress better than we do.
Could you tell us a little bit about Srila Govinda Maharaj? Because I know devotees know him as the successor of Srila Sridhar Maharaj, but don't know so much. You did touch on that he lived with Srila Sridhar Maharaj and Prabhupada.
Yeah.
Prabhupada was a grahasta and everything like that. But if you could tell us a little bit of he was there during that time when you were living there or visiting.
Yeah, he was, but he was a grihasta then.
Mhm.
He was, still he was, like Srila Sridhar Maharaj's right hand man. Although very self-effacing, humble Vaishnava, you wouldn't have known that unless you'd kind of seen over some time. He was never putting himself forward as a big person or anything like that. But he did come, as I mentioned before, to the lotus feet of Srila Sridhar Maharaj in 1947, and he tells us how, that at that time he was born in Gormandala, in a village called Bamanpur, which is originally was called Brahmanpur. So they were all Brahmins there, but through the local language and everything, it became Bamanpur. And so as he grew up, his father was a guru, a Vaishnav guru, and like family guru, if you like, and very famous kirtan singer at that time. And Srila Govinda Maharaj learned to sing kirtan from his father. Excuse me. His father wouldn't allow him to learn many of the songs about rasa and so many things. He thought this is like too high for a young boy to learn all these things. So Govinda Maharaj would say, I would just like hide nearby when he was like singing these songs with his devotees, and I would hide or pretend I'm reading a book or climb up a tree, or this way I would hide all these things. He said, when his father passed away, he said, one day my uncle was on the telephone, and he said my uncle was very famous in Bengal as a stick fighter. There's a kind of Bengali martial arts where they fight with sticks, and his uncle was very famous at that time for that. And he said, and very like kind of macho man, he said, and I saw when he came off the telephone, he's crying, and he said, I never saw him cry in my whole life. Then I asked him, Uncle, what's wrong? And he said, oh, they came because every year they would invite Govinda Maharaj's father to come and give Bhagavat part for like a month at some temple, and do kirtan with his group there. And he said they asked me if we would come this year, and he said I couldn't tell them that he'd passed away. It was very close, shortly afterwards. And he said, but we cannot accept the invitation because no one else can sing all those songs and knows how to do that. And Govinda Maharaj said, I know those songs. He said, how do you know those songs? You were never taught those songs. And he said, test me. Then he asked him, sing this song by Narottam Das Thakur. And he would sing the song like perfect meter, perfect everything. Okay, sing this song by Vidyapati. And he knew that song. He sang that song. And he said, then my uncle embraced me. And he said, when they call back, I'll tell him he cannot accept the invitation, but his son will accept the invitation. So anyway, this way, Govinda Maharaj, would go like this. But then he was staying nearby, in a small town nearby, where he was apprenticed to a doctor. And in those days, if you like are the apprentice of a doctor, after so many years, you become recognized as a doctor yourself in the locality. So this was a kind of his career plan, if you like. And so he's going every morning to prepare the surgeries, to clean it and everything before the clients would come, and then the doctor would come. And he said, then after that, he said, then I go and play football with my friends. And he's like 17 years old, so he went and played football. And he said, and I would nearby there was the house of this big zamindar, and he said, who was very rich. He said, but he liked me. He said, but he was a bit of a gunda also, like a kind of gangster, involved in organized crime and in that small way that they do over there. Then he said, but he liked me, and I would stay in his house sometimes overnight. He said he had a big library, and I would read in his library. And he said, yeah, many novels and so on, and sometimes I'd stay overnight. He said, but this zamindar, he also liked sadhus very much. So he's always inviting sadhus, and they're having some program in his house. And he said, so I would go sometimes, but not so interested in that. He said, but then one day, this group of sadhus came there, and he said, I could see they're completely different to the other sadhus that have come. So they're there, and he said, and so I'm there in the evening with them, and he said, and they're washing my brain. Srila Govinda Maharaj said, he said, they're telling your mother is nothing, your father is nothing, only Krishna is real, everything else is illusion, and like this, Then he said, this way they're he said, talking this nonsense, washing my brain. He said, but I cannot deny what they're saying. I cannot deny that what they're saying is true. And he said, so amongst the party, they're doing kirtan. He said, but none of them could play the mridanga very nicely. He said, but my father taught me to play the mridanga from a young boy. Then he said, I said, can I play? And they said, well, you can try, And then he said, when they saw how beautifully he played, then they thought, we need to get this boy. We need to take this boy with us for our party. Then they said, oh, we are going back to Navadvip. We're living with one sadhu there. And if you want, you can come with us. Will you come with us? And Govinda Maharaj said, I don't know why, but I said yes. I said, yes, I'll come. And then he said, and my nature is, once I've made a promise, I'll never go back on that. And he said, I'd never told a lie in my entire life. Then he said, then I realized what I'd committed to, that, I'm going to go back and join their temple. And he said, so I thought, like, how can I get out of this? Then he said, so I thought, if I modify my promise a little bit, then they'll be able to say, oh, no, it's not possible. We can't take you, and I'll escape. So then after a few days, they were there for like a week doing this program. And after 3 or 4 days, the brahmachari that liked Srila Govinda Maharaj very much, he said, so coming with us? And Govinda Maharaj said, yes, I'm still coming, but you'll have to take me tonight, because after tonight it won't be possible. So he thought, this way, because they still had a few days of the program left, they'd be able to say, not possible to take you tonight, never mind. Like, he thought this was his plan to get out of it. Then, to his surprise, the brahmachari said, okay, then tonight. So after the program was finished, then they went to about 11 o'clock in the evening. He said, then myself and this brahmachari, we walked from I think it was Nandangat, where the program was, to Navadvip, and it's like 20 miles or something. We just walked through the night. And he said we arrived at the Ganges, the other side of the Ganges from where the Chaitanya Saraswati Math is. at about 3:30 in the morning. So he said, then there's no bridge, there's no ferry, there's no boat, nothing to go across. So he said, then we'd have to swim across. And he said, I just come in the clothes that I was wearing. He said, so I took them off and I made them into a bundle and swam across the river, holding them above my head with that brahmachari. We got to the other side, we dressed, and then he said, all this time I'm thinking, he said, from my childhood, I'm hearing about Vashishta Rishi's ashram and, from Ramayana and Mahabharata, all these descriptions of these great sadhus' ashrams. And I'm thinking it's going to be like this. So then when I came there, it was just a field with like a thatched hut in that field, and he said that brahmachari could see in my face my disappointment. And he said, no, don't worry. It is a small ashram, but a big sadhu lives here. And then they came. This was Nishinga Chaturdashi in 1947. And they arrived there. And he said, and he saw Srila Sridhar Maharaj was chanting japa, walking up and down outside the thatched hut. That was their first meeting. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj said, will you stay? And Govinda Maharaj said, he said, I thought, why is he asking me this? I already said I was going to stay. So I've already committed to it. So why he's asking? I said, yes, then I'll stay. And the rest is history, so to say, then. But within a week, seeing Govinda Maharaj's qualities, Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he decided that if I can train this boy, he will be my successor in the future. And 40 years later, that was what happened. So,
what was your relationship like with Srila Govinda Maharaj?
It was really beautiful. I didn't, when in the time of Guru Maharaj, I didn't know him very well. I'll be honest about that. I didn't really have any idea, that he was the successor, or maybe I'd heard it, or it didn't really register with me because I never thought the day would be when Srila Sridhar Maharaj wasn't there any longer.
Right.
But we did see that Guru Maharaj he gave Srila Govinda Maharaj his chair 3 years before he passed away, which is kind of unprecedented thing. He made him the acharya of the mott while he was still alive, and he said, okay, I'm retired from that now. He's the guru of this mission now. He'll give Harinam, he'll give Gayatri, he'll give sannyas, everything from this day onward. And I was there at that time, witnessed that at that time. And Srila Govinda Maharaj, he gave a very beautiful talk, and he said that was the day, it was on Bahulastami, and he 1985, I think it was, and that day Srila Sridhar Maharaj had given him sannyas, and he's always telling, no, Maharaj, give me more time, or appoint somebody else, I'll serve them. I don't really want to do this, and really didn't want to do it. Finally, Srila Sridhar Maharaj said, if you don't accept this chair, tomorrow I will leave my body. Then Govinda Maharaj said, okay, Maharaj, I'm your goat. You can cut my tail or you can cut my head, whatever you want to do then. So that day, Bahulastami, which is also the day before Srila Sridhar Maharaj's appearance day, then he gave Govinda Maharaj sannyas and made him sit in his own chair and made that proclamation. And Govinda Maharaj gave this beautiful talk. He said, I remember in that talk, he said that Vaishnav Tridandi sannyas is Kai Manovakya, words, mind, words, and deeds for the service of Hari. He said, but my Tridandi sannyas, I say, is the service of Guru Maharaj's deity, the service of Guru Maharaj's mission, and the service of Guru Maharaj's devotees. And he said, and I want you all to know that I'm the garbage can of this temple, and any rubbish you can deposit with me. And it was very heart-rending kind of talk he gave that day. But those a few things I remember. And from that day, I didn't really have, I'll be honest, I didn't have any faith, particularly in Srila Govinda Maharaj. at that time because I didn't know him, and my faith was with Srila Sridhar Maharaj, and although previously all my interaction with Govinda Maharaj was always very nice, very beautiful, and very friendly, and I saw that Srila Sridhar Maharaj never made any decision if Govinda Maharaj wasn't there, even
Wow.
before his sannyas. Like if there was anything to be decided, he would say, "When Govinda Maharaj comes, we'll decide." And then he would and like so much he was so much attached to Govinda Maharaj that Govinda Maharaj, he's married, right? He has 3 daughters and he has to go to Calcutta, so he's going to Calcutta, going on the rickshaw to the train station, and then by the time he gets to the train station, Srila Guru Maharaj has sent a brahmachari to intercept him by taking a shortcut and saying, "No, you have to go back. Guru Maharaj doesn't want you to leave." So it was very, very intimate relationship. And I can say their relationship was like more than just guru disciple. If you can, like what you would expect a guru disciple relationship to be, it was all that, but something more than that. Then anyway, then we didn't even after he gave the chair to Govinda Maharaj, Guru Maharaj is still there, so it didn't really affect us, his disciples, so much until Srila Sridhar Maharaj's passing in 1988, and then we started to see who, by installments, if you like, who Govinda Maharaj was, and we, like gradually, I can say, my faith in him developed, my relationship with him developed, and I got to, and I think I actually got to understand more about Srila Sridhar Maharaj through my relationship with him than directly through my relationship with Srila Sridhar Maharaj. Like I had 6 years association with Srila Sridhar Maharaj, but with Govinda Maharaj, I had over 25 years association with him. So I can say, and I have no problem to say that substantially, I consider Govinda Maharaj my guru, actually, even more than Srila Sridhar Maharaj. And I don't think Srila Sridhar Maharaj would be unhappy that I would say that. He'd actually be more happy that I say that. So, we didn't know, but Srila Sridhar Maharaj didn't want to accept any Western disciples at all. He had 2, actually. One was Dibyashari lady, and one was Jagarendu. One man, one woman. They weren't related or anything, but they were his disciples, first Western disciples. And then when we all kind of came to him en masse, then he said, "I'm at the fag end of my life. Then how can I actually help these devotees? And when I'm gone, who will take care of them?" And Srila Govinda Maharaj said, "I'll take care of them, Maharaj, if you all accept them." And maybe not everybody knows that, but because of the intervention of Srila Govinda Maharaj, Srila Sridhar Maharaj accepted us as his disciples, and really over 25 years, and he traveled, as you know, around the world. Like 23 times he traveled around the world, Srila Govinda Maharaj.
Wow.
And of those 23 times, he visited our temple in London 23 times. Not every single tour, but sometimes twice in one tour. He would come in the beginning and then go on to America or go on to Australia and come back via London again. So, we got a lot of his association in London, and in 2000 he gave me charge in London. And that we only had the one temple then, which is still going in our small temple in Green Street in East London. And Srila Govinda Maharaj would come there and he would say, "This is my Guru Maharaj's temple." And Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he also wrote us a letter and he said, "I consider my London mott to be another room of my Navadvip mott."
Wow.
So yeah, it was, and so when Govinda Maharaj would come, he would consider, "Oh, this is Guru Maharaj's mott. I'm in Guru Maharaj's mott." Then even as the Acharya, they made many centers in his name. but London he considered specifically to be Srila Sridhar Maharaj's temple. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj had the deities installed there in 1985, Sri Sri Guru Granga Radha Shyam Sundar. And they're still there today. We're worshipping them still today. And so yeah, in 2000 he asked me to take charge in London, and so I kind of oversee both temples. We don't actually have like temple presidents in Chaitanya Saraswati Math.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what is that like, the
Uh,
organizational structure like for the society?
Yeah, so Srila Govinda Maharaj, when somebody referred to me as the temple president once, he said, "No, I'm the president of Chaitanya Saraswati Math. There isn't any other president of Chaitanya Saraswati Math. This is the title president of Sevaita Charja." So he preferred that the leaders would be the secretary of that particular area. So I'm the secretary of the London Chaitanya Saraswati Math. He thought it was a more humble title.
It is, I guess, yeah.
But having said that, we don't have a very, very developed hierarchy in Chaitanya Saraswati Math, where I think organizationally, Srila Prabhupada was a genius as far as those things were concerned, and he organized ISKCON in a very perfect way. And I'd say Chaitanya Saraswati Math is a bit more free flow, than there's not so much of a hierarchy. So that has its benefits and also its problems, because in a society you need some structure so that everybody knows what they're meant to do and who they're meant to answer to. But in our mission, that's not so developed. So sometimes that can be problematic.
But each zone is not zone, but like each area kind of functions on their own in the sense of, okay, there's a secretary of that area and they're
even in London we have the two centers, and I'm the secretary of both, but each of them are autonomous. So then they have they're set up as separate charities, separate bank accounts, separate entities, basically. So and but yeah, I mean, every one of our centers around the world, they're kind of autonomous, really. And in the time of Srila Govinda Maharaj, everybody answered to him. But then after Srila Govinda Maharaj, we're in a different era now, and he named many devotees as gurus for different areas, although not zonal acharyas. That was something that Srila Sridhar Maharaj was very much opposed to, that zonal acharya idea. His idea is,
why was that?
because his idea is that okay, organizationally it may make sense, but he said that the free flow of faith should not be hampered by that.
Right. Like, for example, if someone doesn't have faith in their zonal acharya of that area, how could they take shelter of that person when their faith is not there? Is that
exactly right? And so he said there must be a level field that the prospective disciples can hear from all of those who are in that position of acharya or guru. Then they can make a choice according to their heart, not by any diktat or like local, that this is the guru here, so you have to accept them. In fact, in his discussions with the ISKCON leaders back in the 1980s, that was one of the questions they asked, was if somebody is like forced to take initiation from a guru that they don't really have any faith in, what will happen? What will be their fate, basically? And Srila Sridhar Maharaj's reply was, if they have no faith in that person, they can make no spiritual progress at all in this life. So, it's kind of the all-important thing, isn't it? Right? That's the first principle of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, is the acceptance of a spiritual master. So, it's like the most important decision you're ever going to make in your life. I often say to people, if you decide that you're going to get married, you don't just walk out in the street and ask the first girl you meet, should we get married? You know, or hopefully not anyway. But you will want to see, is this person compatible with me? What kind of qualities do they have? Like what are the chances of this being a successful relationship in whichever way you look at that. So if you're going to do that with a marriage partner, then accepting a guru is even more important than that. Marriage is just for now, but our spiritual master, connection with the spiritual master, is our eternal life connection with Krishna. So you don't, not just the first guy that comes along with a saffron cloth and a danda, okay, or whoever it may be. Then there should be some, as Guru Maharaj said, some free flow of faith that has to be there, like essential to the guru-disciple relationship.
Right. I remember on Facebook there was I think it was in the London Temple. There is some Srila there, and you had told me the story of that. Would you mind telling the story of that deity?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
It was I think it was a Govardhan Srila.
Okay, I mean, there's not much story to that really, but I have a Govardhan Shila, which Srila Sridhar Maharaj gave me. Maybe it was that.
Yeah, maybe it was that. Yeah.
So yeah, that was when when we established the temple in London and the deities were installed there, Radha Shyam Sundar and Mahaprabhu. Then we wanted to, I was a pujari in ISKCON, so I had some experience with that. So I was kind of became the de facto pujari for the London temple, but I knew that in Navadvip the worship was slightly different to how we'd learned in ISKCON. So then the sannyasi who was in charge there, he arranged with Guru Maharaj, you can go to India, to Navadvip, and they'll teach you that process, as was established by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So I did that, went there, and then when I came back, then after some time, I had a desire to enter into the Grihastha ashram, and so I asked Guru Maharaj's permission. But it wasn't just like, I'm going to find some girl and we can get married. But then everything that goes along with that. We weren't a wealthy society that the householder disciples can all live in the temple and like have some allowance or whatever. If you're going to get married, you have to find a job and you have to get a home and you have to do all these things, which the normal kind of things that people do when they get married. So I asked Guru Maharaj's permission, and he very graciously sent me a reply saying, yes, you may do that. He said, but just remember that independence is the demon that takes us away from Krishna's service. So, okay.
Wow.
Trying to remember that, then I started to proceed. But so anyway, that meant that gradually my service as the pujari became less, and other services instead. So then I wasn't doing the Archan service in the temple, but I liked to do that service. So I asked Guru Maharaj, can I worship a deity in my home? And I already had, from long time ago, I had Gornitai, small Gornitai, and Jagannath Baladev Subhadra, which I made myself when I was a kid, carved them and painted them myself. So I had them, and I'm thinking, with Guru Maharaj's permission, I'll worship them. So anyway, I asked Guru Maharaj in a letter. I asked Guru Maharaj's permission. The reply came back: Harinam is our deity. No other deity is necessary in Kali Yuga.
Wow.
So okay, so, but if you want to do some Archan Seva, then we can discuss next time you come to Navadvip. So all right. So later that year, I came there to Navadvip, and it was I'd always go like October, November time for Srila Sridhar Maharaj's Vyasa Puja, and like maybe a week or two after is the Anukut Govardhan Puja. So I arrived there and I said to Guru Maharaj, "Oh, I asked you in that letter about Archan, and you said yes, we can discuss when you come. So here I am. Then Guru Maharaj said, okay, and he more or less was like dismissed me from that. Okay, and then I thought, okay, I'm not going to push it. I'm not going to like ask anymore. So then the day of Govardhan Puja came, and Guru Maharaj gave a talk in the morning, and then so after the talk we were going to take breakfast, but as I'm going back to my room, then Guru Maharaj's secretary comes running and says, "Oh, Guru Maharaj wants to see you." I thought, "Oh dear, what have I done now? Have I done something wrong?" Then I went upstairs to Guru Maharaj, and he has this. I think they call it like a plantation chair. It's like with these big flat wooden arms, and he's sitting in that chair. Then on the chair, in a white cotton cloth, there's a small, like this size, like Govardhan Shila, and some Radha Kundamala made from the clay of Radha Kund there. And I made my obeisances, and the Guru Maharaj said, "Oh, so you asked about doing some Archan Seva in your home?" I said, "Yes, Maharaj." He said, "My Guru Maharaj liked that the Grihastha devotees, they worship Govardhan Shila." And I was a little like in awe of that, like a Shila. Like Gornitai, that seems safe to me, but Shila. Okay, then I thought, like, what have I let myself in for here? So I can see them there. And then he said, so Mahaprabhu gave Govardhan Shila to Raghunath Das Goswami. I'm giving to you. Oh, okay. Then he showed them. He said, "This is the Govardhan Shila, and this is the Radha Kunmala." So generally two, the Radha Kunmala or the Gunja Mala from the Gunja berries that grow in Radha Kund, they are considered to be non-different from Srimati Radharani. So, and there are there's two types of worship of Govardhan. One is without the representation of Radharani as the Haridasa Bharja, the supreme servitor of Krishna, and the other is as Krishna himself with Srimati Radharani. So this he gave me. Then I said, like, how do I worship them? How do I worship them? And he said, "It is hard." But I heard, "It is hard." And I said, "It's hard?" and Guru Maharaj said, "No, not hard. Hard." That Krishna likes hearts, not so much brains. And I thought, oh, okay, this is good. Then he said, "You can just every day offer tulsi leaf and Ganges water, and he'll be happy. And whatever you eat, you can offer to him." All right. Then I said, should I bathe him? And he said, "No, not necessary. If you want to, you can, but not necessary." Then I said, "But whatever I start, I have to maintain that." And Guru Maharaj said, "No, no. It is household deity at the convenience of the household. It is not any strict thing you have to follow." I said, "Oh, okay." Then he told me a few other things, and he said, "But in the worship, always remember that the holy name is the most essential thing in Kali Yuga. Without the holy name," he said, "then that worship may just be like waving some burning sticks, like kind of nothing, like meaning nothing." So
Right.
then, okay, then he gave them to me, and I took them home. And for a while, whenever I would go to India, still I wasn't married at that time. So whenever I would go to India, I used to carry them in a pouch around my neck. But then going through immigration and customs, they used to mess with them sometimes. Then that was kind of unhappy. And Guru Maharaj said, "No, not necessary to always bring them with you. You can just keep them at home, and then even if someone else can do the worship, then good. But if not, you can just put them to rest and resume when you return. Okay, then I asked Guru Maharaj, so what? No, actually, Guru Maharaj's secretary. He said, so what name for them, Maharaj? What are their names? And Guru Maharaj said, he thought for a moment, then he said, Giridhari Gopinath. Everything is contained in this name. And then he said, must have repeated it like 10 times. Giridhari Gopinath, Giridhari Gopinath, Giridhari Gopinath.
Wow.
And that was my how I was given the Giriraj Govardhan. Actually, and how they came there to be in Guru Maharaj's mott in Navadvip was also a story that some devotees from ISKCON they came with like a sack of Shalagram Shilas that they'd collected, like a big cloth sack, and they came to show them to Srila Sridhar Maharaj. And they thought that, when Guru Maharaj saw, he'd just be like, Jai, that's great, that. But when Guru Maharaj saw them, he was like, oh, okay. Then he asked that devotee, like, what do you intend to do with these shalagrams? And they said, oh, we're going to worship them. And Guru Maharaj said, no, I can't allow you to do that. So he said, you have to give them to me. And they gave them to Guru Maharaj. And in that sack, there were 3 Govardhan Shilas as well as the Shalagram Shilas. Then those shalagrams, they were put in a high place, and Guru Maharaj would say, like every day for maybe 2 weeks, he's saying, who can I find that's qualified to worship these shalagrams? What will I do with these shalagrams? And then one of the devotees said, someone can take them back and put them in the Gandaki, back in the river. And Guru Maharaj said, yes, that's what we should do. Who can do that? And one of our devotees who was there at that time, Mahananda Prabhu, who's now Bhakti Ranjan Madhusudan Maharaj.
Oh, yes, I've heard of him.
He was volunteered. He didn't volunteer, he was volunteered. They said, oh, Mahananda Prabhu, he can take them. And then Mahananda Prabhu, as he was then, he was called, and Guru Maharaj said, can you take them, these shalagrams, back to Nepal, to the Gandaki River, and will you do it? And he said, yes, Maharaj, I'll do it. And he said, when can you start? When can you leave? Tomorrow? Can you leave tomorrow? Okay. And that's what he did. He took them by himself. He carried them all the way to Nepal, to the Gandaki River, and placed them back in the river. And but the 3 Govardhan Shilas, Guru Maharaj kept them there. And one of those he gave to me, and others he gave to other disciples.
And you still have that Sheila?
Yeah, he's here. Yeah, he's my. We live in his house. Let's say we try to think in that way, at least.
Wow,
it's his house. So
beautiful.
Yeah. So yeah.
I also remember. I think there was a picture on Facebook with Srila Bhakti Pramod Puri Maharaj doing puja, and there's a picture of like Radha Gokulananda from the manor.
Yeah.
Could you tell us about your interaction with him also?
Yeah. Sometimes Guru Maharaj would send me to visit his godbrothers, usually with a letter, like some letter that he wants to communicate something. I never knew what was the content of that. But anyway, Bhakti Pramod Puri Maharaj, when he would stay in Calcutta, he stayed at Madhav Maharaj's mott, which is near Kalighat. So then one day I was sent to go there, and I arrived late in the evening, so I stayed over there. And it was a letter for Srila Puri. And in the morning, he wants to do his puja every day. He was like considered the authority on deity worship in the Gaudiya mott. And even when in Navadvip, when the Lakshmi Varaha Shila came there, Guru Maharaj had him come and like verify, yes, it's Varahadev, and this type of worship should be done, and so on. He was very expert in all of those things. So he has 2 Shilas, Govardhan Shilas, that he worships there every day. And so he asked me if I would assist him. So like, bringing water, bringing this, bringing tulsi, bringing all these things. And I see on the wall, he has an old poster of Radha Gokulananda from Bhaktivedanta Manor in a frame, and I've seen that poster. I actually have a copy of that poster somewhere, but it was very, like early days of that worship from the manor, and he had that on the wall. But it's not just like decorating his wall. He's doing puja to that every morning. So he's putting tulsi on Krishna's feet, tulsi on Radha on his hand, and like telling mantra and everything. And also, how many devotees, I don't know if it's still the fashion, but it was when I was in ISKCON, that devotees would have a badge or a button, as you say there, with a picture of a deity on their bead bag. So some devotee from ISKCON had given Puri Maharaj one of these buttons with a picture of Jagannath on it. So he's taken that button, and instead of like putting it on his bead bag or somewhere, it's in a singhasan in his room, and he's doing puja to that button every morning. And as he's doing it, he's looking at me and laughing and saying, "ISKCON Jagannath. It is ISKCON Jagannath." And he's doing puja every day. He is such a beautiful devotee. I met him many times, and one time I gave him a bottle of Ribena. Do you know Ribena? That
Ribena,
blackcurrant drink, So
yeah.
I gave him as a gift because I bought it with me, and I gave him as a gift. And he just started crying and saying, "Oh, you've given me something so valuable, and I've got nothing to give you at all. I have nothing to give you in return." And I was, "Maharaj, this is nothing. Like if you give some mercy to me, that's more than enough." But he was really beautiful. Also, like senior to Guru Maharaj, but he considered Srila Sridhar Maharaj. He's like his guru. He considered like that, and wrote many things about Srila Sridhar Maharaj and spoke many things. He would come to the mosque. In fact, he told that at the time of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's passing, then Srila Sridhar Maharaj was asked to sing Sri Rupa Manjari Pada on the night before his passing, which is, as we know, is considered to be the highest song of our, the Gaudiya canon, if you like, the highest song. And Srila Guru Maharaj said, "I'm not a good singer." He said, "I was a good dancer. In the kirtan, I'm a very good dancer." And we also saw Guru Maharaj, even in his last years, sometimes dance in the kirtan. It was really beautiful to watch. But anyway, so he said, "So I'm hesitating to sing." When Prabhupada asked me, then Bhakti Pramod Puri Maharaj, he was considered like maybe the best kirtan leader in the whole of the Gaudiya Math at that time. Then Kunja Babu, who later became Bhaktivedanta Tirtha Maharaj, he was Saraswati Thakur's secretary, and everyone was submissive to him, even the sannyasis, everyone. Whatever he said, they had to follow that. So then when he saw Guru Maharaj hesitating, he asked Puri Maharaj, "You sing. And then so Puri Maharaj began singing Sri Rupa Manjari. After maybe 2 or 3 lines, then Prabhupada Saraswati Thakur said, "No, stop. I don't want to hear the sweet song. I want to hear Sridhar Maharaj sing." Then Guru Maharaj sang that song. And, just before Saraswati Thakur's passing. And Pramod Puri Maharaj, he wrote a letter to Srila Sridhar Maharaj. And there he said, that day when you sang that song, said, we witnessed a mystical transference of power. This is my feeling, that he has made you the head of the Rupanuga Sampradaya. And he said, therefore I consider you Rupanuga Dhara. Dhara means like current, the current of the Rupanuga Sampradaya coming through you. And almost everyone, maybe everyone, as far as I'm aware, that was witnessed that, they all considered that, and so many said it was his your initiation into rasa seva. They told Srila Sridhar. Anyway, so yeah, then Puri Maharaj would come. Many times he came when I was to the mott on Guru Maharaj's Vyasa Puja day, or sometimes just to visit Guru. And Guru Maharaj would say, ask him to speak, and he would say, even if he speaks in Bengali, because he can speak very nice English, but he said, but even if he speaks in Bengali, you give your attention to that because his vibration is so pure, you must benefit, even if you can't understand what it is that he's saying.
Wow.
Yes, I actually was very fortunate, met many of Srila Sridhar Maharaj's and Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers in their last days. Madhusudan Maharaj, Madhav Maharaj, Goswami Maharaj, Paramahansa Maharaj, Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj, and others.
Wow. What is your, I wanted to ask you, what is your realizations from observing, meeting all these amazing Vaishnavas that we hear so many amazing stories about? What did you kind of take from them? What do you hold from them to this day from observing them and kind of interacting with them?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I mean, my interaction with them was kind of minimal, really, but I did witness them and their relationship with Guru Maharaj, and they're very, I mean, really, it's a different era, really a different era of Vaishnava, and maybe we won't see those kind of Vaishnavas again. I don't know, but really, I mean, very high and very beautiful, all very beautiful devotees, and like to think that sometimes they say, that people would say that Prabhupada was the only good disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Not only is that like impossible for us to believe after meeting them, but it's actually an insult to Saraswati Thakur that he could only make one good Vaishnava from his disciples. I mean, seriously, no one did what Srila Prabhupada did, and no one is ever claims that.
Right.
His position in our Gaudiya history is unique, but these Vaishnavas, really, they're Vaishnavas that you read about in Chaitanya Charitamrita. When you hear about Mahaprabhu's associates, and you see these are devotees like that, like so beautiful and with such high realization. And I remember of all of them, actually, I think that Bhakti Vichar Jajava Maharaj, he was Srila Sridhar Maharaj's closest friend. He was the last person to take sannyas from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And he was very young when he took sannyas, maybe still in his 20s. And on the night before his sannyas, he, kind of like got cold feet, and came to Saraswati Thakur, like in tears. I don't think I can do this. I really don't think I can do this. And Saraswati Thakur said, no, you have nothing to fear because you're taking shelter of he who fear himself is afraid of. So don't have any fear. Anyway, he took sannyas, and he's very close with Guru Maharaj and came to visit Guru Maharaj maybe more than any of the other godbrothers that I met. Maybe Madhusudan Maharaj also very often coming, but Jajava Maharaj coming a lot. And he didn't speak any English at all. But he saw me coming also a lot there. And then one day he called me over, and he's speaking to me in Bengali, and I can't understand anything he's saying. But his servant, whose name was Ramchandra Prabhu, he could speak a little bit in English, and so he had a book, an English book that was published by the Gaudiya Math. I think it's called Path to God Realization or something like that. I already had that book, but he wants to give me that book, Jajava Maharaj. So he gave that book to me. I took it on my head, and it very, very happily, we had that kind of interaction. I remember him asking one of our sannyasis who can speaks Bengali very fluently, but a Westerner, and then he asked him, "So, what will you say that in some Purana it is told that when Krishna was with the maybe this is going to be a bit of a controversial thing to say. When Krishna was sheltering the devotees under Govardhan Hill, that the food ran out, so that they had to eat the buffalo. Said it's mentioned in some Purana. This has been mentioned. How will you like explain that to anyone? And that sannyasi, he said, he's trying to think what the answer could be, and he said, "It is a chintya. It is a chintya, inconceivable." And Joshua Maharaj said, "And that'll be your answer to everything you don't know the answer to, isn't it? It is a chintya." Anyhow, yeah. So, and of course, Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj, he was also another like real standout devotee, because I think everyone more or less has heard about him.
Right.
He would come and visit Guru Maharaj a lot, and always like so like jolly and laughing and coming to Guru Maharaj, and Guru Maharaj had some very like beautiful relationship with him. Sometimes one time he kicked him out of the temple. Akinchana Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj. He came there because he liked kirtan so much. Sometimes he would go and hear the Sahajya kirtan to like learn a tune or something. Then Guru Maharaj told him once, our Guru Maharaj would not approve of you going to hear the Sahajya kirtan. Then no one's thinking that he's going to be like fall down after hearing that or something. He said, but
Right.
Guru Maharaj would not allow this. Then he said, and if you again go, you cannot stay in this mosque. And again he went to this, and he came back, and Guru Maharaj said, "Oh, I heard again you went to that Sahajya Kirtan." And he said, "Yes, Maharaj, I went." He said, "Then you have to get out of this temple. You have to leave this temple." Then he left the temple, and as he's walking down the road, then I think it was Madhav Maharaj. He bumped into Madhav Maharaj, and Madhav Maharaj said, "Oh, where are you going?" He said, "Oh, Sridhar Maharaj just kicked me out of the temple." Why? And he said, "Why?" He said, "Because I was listening to the Sahajya Kirtan, attending the Sahajya Kirtan." And Madhav Maharaj said, "Oh, then he is right." Yeah. Anyway, the next day, he came back. He's back in the temple, sitting there. And Guru Maharaj said, "Didn't I ask you to leave?" And he said, "Yes, Maharaj, I left. But you didn't say I couldn't come back."
Amazing.
Guru Maharaj said, "Okay, fair enough."
Wow.
And
Well,
sorry, Prabhu, yeah.
No, we're just running out of time,
Running
but
out of time.
maybe we can do a part 2 sometime, talk about all the other amazing personalities that you met. I really, really appreciate you coming on and talking these amazing historical accounts of Srila Sridhar Maharaj, Srila Govinda Maharaj, and all the other disciples of Srila Saraswati Thakur. And wow. I'm just speechless, honestly, about all the different stories. More stories you must have of all these. Have you documented any of these things yourself?
I haven't actually, but there are those who say that I should, but and maybe I should, because they are things that maybe will get lost, otherwise.
Totally. I mean, yeah, maybe we can document some of them here on the podcast
Yeah, why not?
on a part 2. But any concluding words, Devashis Prabhu?
I don't know. What can I say?
Sorry to put you on the spot there.
No. Well, Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he said, when I left the company of my godbrothers to go and live alone, I had to consider, like, what is the very most essential thing in the life of a Vaishnava, more essential than anything else. And he said, by prayer, introspection, and by studying the scripture, it came to me that Sharanagati, that is the most essential thing in the life of a devotee. And of course, Srila Sridhar Maharaj, then he composed Prapana Jivanamrita. And really, Srila Govinda Maharaj, he says, that is, like a holy script which has manifested from the pen of Srila Sridhar Maharaj. And she's graciously manifested in the world. And really, that's the book if you want to understand Sharanagati. And I highly advise all the devotees to try and read that if you can, and study that. I read it every day, and remember, Srila Prabhupada also used to read this book often, and wanted his sister, got his sister to pay for the first publication of that. So
I believe Srila Prabhupada carried it with him on the Jaladuta. Is that
I
right?
heard that. Yeah, I heard that. I mean, I don't want to say that as a fact because I don't know, but I had
Right.
heard that before. Yeah. So
Right.
so really, that as devotees, all of us, we have to try and cultivate Sharanagati. We have to try and cultivate this as the most essential thing in the life of all devotees, how to surrender to the Lord. And because it's not natural to us in our conditioned state, it's something that we have to return to again and again and again. And without that, our devotion may just be superficial. And really, if we were serious about Krishna consciousness, we have to try to dive deep into that. We haven't got anything else really worth aspiring for in this world. So that's what if I've learned anything from Guru Maharaj, we should try to cultivate Sharanagati. And if I learned anything from Srila Govinda Maharaj, that is the proper way to do that is with humility, tolerance, and giving honor to all, and not expecting any honor for ourselves.
Wow. We got a taste there of your wisdom, which we didn't really. We heard a lot of accounts, but not so much your wisdom. But thank you so much for sharing that, and hopefully in a part 2 we can get more of that wisdom from you, your experiences, and all that. Thank you so much, Prabhu, for that.
It's my great privilege. I can speak all day about Guru Maharaj if you let me.
Yes, wonderful. So if you'd like to get in touch with Devashish Prabhu, you can see his email here on the screen. For our audio listeners, it's DEVASHISEWINS, Devashish Ewins at yahoo.co.uk. You can get in touch with him there if you have any questions for him. I'm really hoping we have a part 2, Prabhu. And I hope that next time I come to England, I can have your association again.
I hope so too, Namaras Prabhu.
Haribol. Okay, so please stay on, Prabhu. I'm just going to turn off the recording. Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you for listening. Haribol.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.